Launching here. Welcome everyone. KeplerCollege YouTube live book club discussion Q&A. I'm joined now with Andrea Gehrz, and we'll see if we are live here. Launching here. Welcome everyone. Okay, I think we're live. Thanks.
I'm
Let
alive.
me rename. We're both alive. Fantastic. So I'm joined by Andrea Gehrz, and she has been a professional astrologer for 24 years. She currently resides in Portland, Oregon, and works exclusively online. And she has written over 15 books on astrology, including several ancient Greek to English translations. And she's most well known for her miraculous textbook entitled Astrological Remediation, a guide for the modern practitioner, which is the textbook for the class she teaches at Kepler, Astrological Remediation. Today, the book that we're going to discuss is Astral Somatica. See if I can get it within the camera frame. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. And I'm really excited to have you on. Thank you for joining me, Andrea. My name is Mary Goderud, by the way, for those joining who don't know. And I want to start off by saying I decided that we should choose this book for the Kepler College book club, which I hope everyone joins and becomes a member of, because I think that it is a great demonstration of how astrology can be effectively integrated with other disciplines like massage therapy or bodywork modalities. And I wanted to read the book to see how you put that into effect. And I think it's an excellent primer, not only on how to synthesize astrology with a practical discipline, but also it's a book that I think everybody at all levels of astrology can benefit from very beginner to more advanced people, because it has some really deep, complex philosophical questions, I think, that it attempts to answer, and I think does so very well. So, if you would kind of contextualize the writing of this book, I would appreciate it, because I know that in the introduction, you talk about how it was spurred on by an injury that you received and the work you got from a body worker to address it.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. Yeah, this book is, this came after astrological remediation and kind of is ended up being the physical remediation. Well, it's not necessarily remediation, but it's like how to look at the chart physically. And the way that it started was, I'd read Medical Astrology by Judith Hill. I'd read the Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology by Cornell. Not read the whole thing, that's a really big book, but I had been studying medical astrology. I had a lot of questions about, why, how it works, all that stuff. Well, I had a neck injury. I think I got in a car accident, and my friend Casey Cardoso is a Virgo rising body worker, double Virgo, but has Jupiter and Pisces square Neptune. So is also like really into esoteric and woo-woo things. And I decided to go to Casey for my body work after my car accident. Well, on the table, because this went on for months and months, because it's pretty bad injury. And we would just talk and talk and talk while I was on the table about medical astrology and this and all this kind of stuff. And, Casey, like I said, is very into esoteric stuff and introduced me to this book, Esoteric Anatomy by Bruce Berger, which is the body as consciousness. And really, this looks at the anatomy of the aura and how it gets in the chart and all this kind of stuff. And Casey also introduced me to something called dermatomes, which we see extensively in our physical astrology work at the Moyer Press. And so dermatomes are these electromagnetic swaths of nervous tissue that chiropractors know about, massage therapists know about, and I realized, and all the stuff I'd studied medically, that these dermatomes were the answer to how does the chart live in the body. And so Casey and I did workshop after my body work ended. We would get together just and talk and talk and talk, and we asked and answered questions for years. We just went back and forth, and I informed what Casey does and Casey informed what I do, and then we built it together and then decided to actually write the book on what we had discovered through our conversations. So that's where Astral Somatica came from. we attempted to make a book where anyone could run their chart through the physical lens as we could see the chart through the physical lens. And so it is a book full of activities. In every chapter, there's an activity. So you read the chapter and then you put your chart through the activities. And if you go through the whole book, you've mapped out your own chart into, a physical map. So that's kind of how it started. And I still hang out with Casey. I'm seeing Casey tonight actually to play Magic the Gathering. But yeah,
Fantastic. Tell her we said hello. We love her book.
yeah. If I could say something else about this, Casey and I work on a lot of real cases together. You know, I recently had somebody come in for, a weird body situation, and they came in thinking I was just going to say astrology psychosomatically says it's this and this, and I was absolutely able to draw it in the dermatomes and say you actually have a structural issue with your spine according to what we know, and I can send you to Casey to get that actually fixed. And so Casey and I actually work together on cases where people have structural problems that are hurting them, and we actually fix those things. And I have examples of hundreds of cases that Casey and I have worked on together. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but this is actually something that is like we use in real life. As I'm the theoretician in a lot of ways, and then Casey's the auto mechanic who actually goes in there and does all the stuff that I can theoretically see or prescribe. I'm not a doctor, but I'm an astrologer making prescriptions, and so Casey can actually do the body work that is prescribed. So this book is not just a silly book. This is a true technical apparatus for body workers and people who want to figure out their medical astrology, kind of.
And that's why what I loved about it. I'm on the meat and potatoes side of astrology, right? Like I think astrology is great. It explains everything from micro problems to macro problems. Like you can find out about your soul's purpose, but you can also find your lost car keys. And I think that that is something very practical and pragmatic that astrology in the real world helps people, and to see it put into practice the way that you have with a massage therapist and then map it out is pretty incredible. And that's why I chose this book, because I've been thinking about that, like how, because astrology is this sort of esoteric philosophical study, but and it can be applied in so many various ways. There's so many types of astrology. So I'm interested in that interface, like how does astrology affect so many different facets of life? And how can it be integrated into practical application? And I think you guys really nailed it with this one, I have to say.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's right now I'm in the business. I'm busy running an NCGR SERG, which is a special interest research group on remediation, and it's really interesting because I often am heard saying astrology is irrefutable as a technical philosophy. And though it can be used scientifically if we do our studies correctly, for instance, I mean, we often have to use research methods that we have never been invented before because I don't know, astrology is its own animal. But I do think that this book is more along the lines of the scientific use of astrology. Because, for example, when Casey and I were working on our research, one of the things we kind of tracked down is that the fascia or the connective tissue in a body, the chart kind of burns into the fascia. And um, basically we were looking at spinal roots. So Casey introduced me the idea that we have a vertebrae, and then we have spinal roots coming out, or nerve roots coming out of those big roots that then go into these dermatomes and they come out like this. And so we were realizing that in the Saturn spot, for example, the vertebrae, the connective tissue around it was really tight. And if you read in medical books, Saturn can cause problems from necrosis of tissue and lack of blood flow. Like you can read that in Judith Hill's book. Like she has the cookbook of Saturn through the signs. What we were asking the questions of like, well, why is that? Okay, Judith's documenting what we see and Cornell's documenting what we see, but we were asking the questions of like, why, how can that happen? What is that? And so we were noticing it's the fascia or the connective tissue where it's the organ of consciousness, some people say. So where we hold tension in our fascia, our consciousness, is also a byproduct of the fascia structurally being tense around certain vertebrae. And the way we would test this is we would go to fairs and we would have people's charts, and I would see the Saturn spot, and Casey would feel down the spine and figure out which vertebrae had tight connective tissue, and then we would go back and forth. Casey would guess, and we would get it correct a lot of the time, a statistically significant amount of the time. And we started to realize that this was actually provable. I mean that, and actually Casey has Saturn in Cancer, and we have an MRI of Casey's Cancer vertebrae, and all of the fascia and the connective tissue in the bone is concretized in there. And so, I mean, we
Wow.
collected all kinds of evidence that for observable evidence showing that astrology is at work. And so I think this is on the scientific side of things. And even my one complaint about the book is it has blurry diagrams, and the reason for that is that I was the one making it, and I'm very busy, and I'm not a Virgo. I don't have any Virgo in my chart, but there is a team that is getting ready to do another edition of the book, and they're going to clean up all the diagrams and things. So
Great. That'll be amazing. On our Facebook page for the Kepler book club, one of our admins posted some clear diagrams of the vertebra with the dermatomes and the corresponding zodiac signs, and that was really helpful. So I'm really excited for the updated version. The whole idea that you can actually map out that there is even deeper basis for Melothesia, and for maybe people who are watching who don't know what that is, that's the idea of the zodiac man or woman, where different body parts are associated with different sign rulerships, like Aries rules the head. The fact that you can even make it more granular and assign the vertebra to it, and then that is sort of the interface there with the energetics of the system that you're talking about, I found fascinating, right? Like you're in real time figuring out how the body is the interface with the way astrological energy manifests into 3D reality, right? Like that I think is pretty mind-blowing.
absolutely. In fact, Casey and I have decided we were talking about maybe rebranding, not because of the business of it, but because so to get the right concept out to the people, which is we were thinking about calling it dermatome astrology as opposed to medical astrology, because we wanted to let people know this is actually another piece of medical astrology that's missing, basically. This is a picture of the dermatomes, just for everyone who's listening. So, the dermatomes come from the spine and they radiate out. Like, for example, Aquarius might be this dermatome. They say Aquarius rules the ankles, but it's actually this whole dermatome going up the leg back to here. So if we had something like Saturn and Aquarius, which would tighten that whole dermatome, the person might get shin splints down here. But we might fix it by going up to the vertebrae here and releasing the connective tissue here, which releases the whole dermatome. So this is kind of this is the map that we use. And in the book, there's a chapter on the EMVI, which is the electromagnetic vibrational imprint. Now, we just invented that name, but it's just like an MRI or a CAT scan. Those are names for diagnostic tests. We made a name for a diagram that you draw in the dermatome body. So in Casey's, charts, Casey has like massage charts, right? So like we will draw the dermatome map of a person's chart, and it will be in Casey's file. And so we actually draw the chart in the body. Every time I get a medical inquiry, I always draw the chart in the body, and that's what the person who I'm doing the reading for gets, is their dermatomal map for whatever question they're getting asked. So I think even we're trying to create diagnostic astrological tools, which I've never seen in medical astrology anywhere. I've never seen anyone draw it in the physical body in a very concrete form before. And I think, what astrology is kind of a killer in as much as we've gotten very far. And it's like, oh, there's a lot of good stuff out there. Cornell and Hill are doing great stuff, but then this is like the missing piece of like, and now here we go, right? It's right here, and we're drawing it right here, and we can even draw the transit to it and what is going on currently. And it's like, so I think astrology is a visual spatial map, and we should be or could be drawing it visually instead of in this circle chart only. It's like, what can we see on this circle chart? Well, this is where we bring it over to here.
And I think that the beauty of this book is that it is a workbook, and it is very good as an instructional book for those new to astrology, because it walks you through the exercises in a workbook style and grounds the astrology in an embodied experience. You even talk about personal style and branding. So I think that that makes it very relatable to new students to astrology, right? Like, because everybody can grok, um, what their personal preferences are or aesthetics, or and kind of connect that to, oh yeah, the light, the quality of the light, and how that imprinted me at the moment of birth, and that translates into my essential nature virtually, like that. And for the beginning astrologer, but also for the practitioner who's maybe more advanced in their studies, like this is a way to really conceptualize it, um, that I don't think that I haven't seen before in medical astrology, even in the classical training.
It's interesting. We were actually trying to create a physical book that didn't necessarily pathologize the physicality of the chart. Although if you do have a pathology, you can use this to locate, where that is in the dermatomes. But like for example, it starts off with astro species. It's like what species are you? So we talk about, someone being a Leo, Aries, Taurus, they'd be a lion, bull, ram. Okay, well, that seems very basic astrology. Why is this in this book? Well, because the ancients knew this too, that how we are built in the dermatomes affects how we function psychically, and like for example, rams. Aries lives in the top of the head. On the dermatome map, Aries is right here. And if you look at rams, they butt heads together. And so we would say if somebody's built with a lot of energy in the top of the head, they're more in your face, right? That's an Aries temperament, is they're built like a ram. And that's a dermatome thing. Lions are built with all this energy around the heart and the flanks, since they're like this, right? Like that's the lion temperament, and their solar plexus chakra is spinning very nicely and all this stuff. That's how a lion is built. If you look at a lion, they have this huge kind of front chest. So the ancients knew this. They would say, I think it's Ptolemy in the Tetrabiblos. He talks about like if you have a bestial chart, you'll be a beast, whereas if you have a humane chart, you'll be more human. Like a Gemini is a human character. It's like lives in the cerebrum and talks like this. And Aquarius is very humane. It's a human carrying, energy or water. But fish, which are Pisces, they feel everything around them. They swim in schools, and, Pisces, they give it the feet, but it's actually this whole auric bubble going from the feet to the top of the head. And, it's like Pisces can kind of feel everything around them, and they're just like a fish, right? And so the reason we included that chapter is we're trying to depathologize physical astrology for a second, so that people don't get this scary version of their chart. Like if you read medical astrology books, you're just like Saturn in Leo, heart attack. Like you're just scared. And we were trying to say, well, with Saturn and Leo, you do have a pinched vertebrae in the dermatomes around the heart. That doesn't necessarily mean you have a heart attack. It means you are tight on that chakra. Whereas a Leo sun is like this on that chakra. Saturn and Leo is more tight there. So we're trying to get you to be able to draw this in your body without necessarily pathologizing it. So that's why we started with just the species. What is your species? And then we also do things like astro fashion, which is kind of fun. It's a fun physical element. So it's kind of a weird book where we do an amalgamation of a bunch of things, but the concept behind it was all things physical, including medical stuff.
Hmm. Great. It was fascinating, a fascinating read. And we have somebody in the chat said that they can't wait to get the book. I encourage you to do so. It is a great book.
Mhm.
And we talked about astro species, and you introduced some other concepts in addition to that one, which I thought was fascinating way to think about your tribe or your zodiac affinities. How about astrokinesiology and astrophysiognomy? Those are two other terms that you introduce that I think are new.
Yeah, I think astrophysiognomy, we get back to Judith Hill. Judith Hill's done a lot of physical work. So it's not that we copied Judith Hill. I just wanted to say she is one of the bigger contributors in astrology to physical astrology. So she wrote the book Astrological Body Types, which I don't know where my copy of it is, but that's physiognomy, which is how people look according to their chart. And astrophysiognomy has been around for thousands of years. Judith did not invent it. Like there are ancient books on physiognomy and medieval books and things like that. I think our addition to physiognomy is color theory. There was, I mean, the color has been around in astrology forever. I grokked a lot from reading the ancient texts in Greek about color theory. For example, when we look at essential dignity of planets, like why is Mars at home in Aries and Scorpio? What the ancients would say is because it's a red planet in a red sign. So it creates a lot of red in the aura, right? So we kind of looked at this is the coloring of your aura, whatever your chart looks like, you know. So one of the reasons I draw charts in full color is, let's say you have Mars in Aries, I can draw a red Mars with a red around it, and you can see there's a lot of redness here, which we know creates inflammation. Like I don't have Mars in Aries, I don't have a red face, but you know how some people, when you look at them, they have a very red face? That's like they have Mars in Aries. That would be red up here in the Aries dermatome with red there. I mean, if it's Mars and Leo, they're going to get more red around this area. Kind of thing. So it's like color theory is one of the biggest things that I study in physiognomy. And I don't know that I've seen that in other. I don't know that I've ever seen that in another book. But basically, for example, we teach people how to dress to their aura. People think that being beautiful has to do with being skinny or this or that. And what we would say it has to do with dressing to your aura. Like, so I think in some ways we're body activists in that way. We say all bodies are beautiful. Physiognomy would say people look like their chart. There are big charts and small charts and skinny charts and lanky charts and, thick charts. And that's actually how we are made. That is activism. And though it's even more activism to say, and your coloring is a magic. For example, when I worked at the Portland School of Astrology, I would teach my students color theory all the time. And, I would teach them, for example, like I always dress to my chart. Like I'm a Scorpio, Gemini, Pisces. So Gemini is powder blue. Like I have powder blue eyes, and Scorpio's is blacks. I'm a Libra Scorpio cusp, so I do black and white as a thing. Anyway, I have no earth in my chart, all this stuff. So I would teach them this, and then one day I would show up wearing all brown. And they would be like, "What are you doing?" Like they would just be appalled by my outfit. And I was like, "What? What's wrong?" But I have no earth in my chart. I have no earth tones, no browns. And like brown on me is just anti-magic. It like does not look, you know. And what I'm trying to prove is that color theory is physiognomy, right? Now, of course, we have to look into different cultures, right? Like African people have a certain palette that is available to them genetically. Like they have brown eyes as a palette or brown skin. I was talking to Ricky about this, Ricky Williams, and he was saying that if you were looking at African physiognomy, you might look at different structures, not colors so much, but you might look at like facial bones or something like that. Or I don't know, he was making the case that it is kind of ethnocentric to even look at coloring. I would say it's just different availabilities per the culture, right? Um,
Different palettes. I think it's still applicable. It would just be within a different color palette. I've often thought, just as far as color theory, that I want to do an essential dignities table in color, right? Like, and Mart, so that's a project. And your book totally inspired me. Like, oh, I really got to get on that. Right?
It's
It's
true. I agree
about
it's a different palette too, because you can be African and be a super Gemini and look very good in light blue because Gemini is a light blue color, and like you can be a very professorial light blue Gemini person. Yeah, I agree with you that it's a palette thing. Why I haven't, let's see. Well, I think there's something in the book about babies' eyes as burning in soon after birth. You know how a baby's born, you don't really see their eye color. Well, I believe that the chart has to burn into the eyes and spine, and then that chart informs what eye color presents. So that's the kind of thing that the color theory side looks at. Also, it can be used medically for looking at inflammation, the potential for feverishness, the potential for coldness. Like we use it medically all the time as well.
I'm looking at the chat here. We have some people joining us from Australia. Someone's friend practiced kinesiology and it was very valuable. So maybe we should go into the astrokinesiology aspect of it that you introduce as well.
As far as I know, that is a term that Casey kind of coined. I've never seen that before either. Now Casey is a Virgo rising, so it's very physical, right? Like that's Virgos are very mechanical, and so Casey is a kinesiologist, like looks at the movement of people and the muscle patterns and all this kind of stuff. And so what Casey's specialty is really saying, in your dermatome body, how are you built? How does this affect your movement, your muscle structure? Everything. Like Casey does a lot of prescribing exercises to people per their chart, right? You have a tight Saturn spot in this, if you have Saturn in Aquarius and your leg is tight, can we do these certain exercises to kind of move that Saturn through? And I think that would be the kinesiology side of things. Now, of course, we
So
got
is
to.
there an innate, would you think there's an innate sort of postural habits that emerge from a natal chart and that those can be addressed, that it's effective to go and look at the natal chart to assist with people maybe breaking movement habits or movement habits that are creating problems for them?
Absolutely. The Saturn spot, with that tension in the vertebrae of the Saturn spot, you know how you'll see some people stooping over as they get older and things like that? And let's say you have Saturn in Cancer and it pinches this ring right here. Cancer would be the kind of dermatomes right up here. So if you had, we call them the rings of Saturn because the pinch of the vertebrae fascia comes from the front of the vertebrae to the back. So it's this whole ring that's pinched. Like if you see somebody hunching over like this and they have Saturn in Cancer, what we need to do is take their fascia in the Saturn area and release it so that they can actually open up. And the way that we release it is we go in and do fascial reconstruction. Casey has all these tools, like she uses like crochet hooks and hammers, and she actually goes in to the vertebrae and taps out all the fascia and unsticks the impingements that come in. So we do gua sha, which is scraping of fascia. Sometimes she'll put cups on and slide them up and down the fascia. So it's just like being an auto mechanic. We say the belt here is too tight, or and we so and the way we fix a Saturn spot is we go at it for 12 weeks in a row. It's a lot of times when you go into a massage, they want to give your whole body the attention, but what we do is just give that Saturn spot the attention, and we just scrape it and get it and get it and get it, and for 12 weeks, and then all of a sudden the postural problem releases, and the energetic problem and the personality relaxes. So
That's what I find fascinating, right? Like everything is connected, all the layers from the physical to the emotional to even the mundane reality of the person. When those blockages or constrictions are removed, then how many different layers in the esoteric anatomy and the personality and the emotion correspondingly relax as well, right? Like everything is connected. So, it's fascinating to think about that and how transits can maybe bring on some predisposed tendencies based on the natal chart. Have you noticed that in practice?
yeah, so let's talk about both those questions or comments and questions. So the first one about just Galen, who was the ancient like anatomist, he would say that the mind's inclination follows the body's temperature. And I think that that's the idea, that if someone's really hot and feverish, then they get feverish temperamentally, they get rash, basically. That's why we say like that was really rash to somebody who's acting out of line, right? They can actually physically get a rash as well. And so the same thing as if we're tight in the spirit with the Saturn. The reason I got into physical remedies is I had been doing astrology readings forever, and I'd be telling people about their Saturn spots, like you have tension in this part of your life, in this part of your psyche, but I couldn't through talk therapy get them to release their Saturn issue. They would just continue to do it. Every time there's a transit to it, they would act in this Saturn fashion. And then we realized that if we release their fascia physically, the personality issues that came with their Saturn relaxed as well. An example of this is, okay, I can use a personal example because I have permission to use my own chart, is I had Saturn and Leo, and Saturn in Leo tightens the heart chakra. It makes a person be like, I'm a total zero, like I'm not very good. Like it's like a humility issue, basically, because the heart chakra, the solar plexus, or actually it's the solar plexus here, it doesn't spin wildly like a Leo would spin wildly, and they'd be like, I'm great just as I exist. The Saturn in Leo is, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And I do a lot of things like reading self-help books, and I do a lot of things that honor it. But I also had asthma in the lower lobe of my lung, and it was pinched from the time I was 7, and I was using inhalers. No one could fix it. And I had Casey do my Saturn, 12 times in a row. And what happened was my asthma went away. First of all, I haven't used an inhaler since that time. And also I relaxed into myself and I said, I'm not terrible. Like the chakra is spinning differently. And I think, I still will always have that humility setting. Now, some people think I'm very grandiose. I have other placements in my chart that are kind of grandiose, right? But that Saturn checks me over and over again. And I think now it's more of a healthy check of like, it's like when you have a plant and the root is suffocating under the earth, that would be like a Saturn spot that's too tight. And then we take it out, we shake it off, we plant it back in the earth and it can breathe and grow now. And I think, you know, I just get real sensitive when I see people who can't breathe and can't grow because their Saturn is beating them up. And that's why I'm very passionate about getting this dermatome work out to all the astrologers. I really think the astrologers of the next generation could be working with massage therapists and all these people to really be loosening people's impingements. And can you imagine a society where Saturn was healthily checking people? I mean, maybe that's utopian, but uh
Bring it on. I think we need some more utopian vision here and not unrealizable. I am a certified body worker. I have received a lot of body work. When we were off camera before we went live, I told Andrea about how I was the dean of students at Hartwood Institute where Bruce Berger taught. So I know Bruce Berger, the author of Esoteric Anatomy, very well. And it's which Andrea was a little bit blown away. But it's all connected. It is, and someone agreed in the chat. So to for me to bring all my loves together and my lived experience of how powerful body work can be, right? But how it does correlate with astrology and how you're literally embodying your astrology and you can remediate that, like you don't have to live in pain that then cascades into various other aspects of your life, right? Not just physical.
absolutely. And
So I
oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I
This
would just think that that's an important thing for the world to understand, right? Like there is a cure and it doesn't have to be a, a permanent sentence on anyone.
Yeah, and I think if we could get this correct, there could be astrologers on teams in really hard cases. For example, a lot of times what allopathic doctors have been known to do, and I am not a doctor, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, but let's say somebody has hip pain, they will prescribe a pill like gabapentins or something like that that is systemic. And what we do is go into the actual hip fascia. We go right at the issue structurally, and people think as a remedy person, I'm just this talk therapist theoretician. I'm like, no, I'm a physical mechanic going in and doing remedy. Like, I see what we could be doing as like auto mechanics on a car, right? We can see the electrical diagram of the car, which is the aura and the chakras and the dermatomes. That's the chart. And then we go in and we physically fix it like an auto mechanic would fix it. Now, bringing you back to the question of transits, let's use a case study. Okay, we had someone with a Mars-Saturn conjunction in Gemini. So Mars inflamed, Gemini is kind of in this area and down the arms and hands, and Mars will inflame the dermatome it's in. So this person had a lot of muscle and inflammation here. And then they had Saturn there, which tightened the dermatomes and tightened the vertebrae there. So they had inflammation and restriction in this same spot. Well, Saturn in Sagittarius came around, which was opposed the Mars Saturn. And Judith talks about this in medical astrology that there can be an opposite effect. Like if you have Saturn and Sag and the hip gets tight, it translates up to it's because we're born in a circle, right? And the belly button's at the middle and it comes out like this. Well, that hip tightness of Saturn and Sag also opposed that Mars Saturn, and the person's jaw locked up. And they were actually going to have surgery. They were going to cut the tendon right here. And so Casey went at them and found that all the hip compression and the vertebral compression were serious. And so Casey did their magic, and all of a sudden, like we released it from back here, and all of a sudden the person could open their jaw. And we actually waylaid physically cutting a tendon, so that's an example of a transit coming in, exacerbating the Mars Saturn, and then absolutely, we were able to address that.
And that's wonderful and amazing and how life-changing for that person. And rather than having to go through debilitating surgery, that what would be the effects of that, the unintended consequences or collateral damage of having such an invasive procedure, right? Like, so this seems to me an incredible tool to address truly the symptoms rather than, and I'm not, a medical doctor either, nor do I give medical advice, but I think that it's important to treat the root causes of illness, right? Rather than sort of slapdash, oh, let's cut your tendon. It seems to be an extreme sort of top-down a way to address the problem rather than kind of working at a deeper level. And so that was my thought. And also spirals, right? The hip and the jaw, like everything is connected via a spiral. And you touch on that in the book as well. And that seems to be a demonstration of that.
Yes, totally. We spiral out from that belly button, and everything happens like Bruce Berger talks about that. Is like we breathe in spirals actually, and spirals go up and down, and they come out. And I wanted to talk to the affordability of astrological healthcare here, which is, first of all, the diagnosis. I do readings for $114. Why that number? I don't know. I just love the number 14. And it's like, and it takes me that much of my time to draw the dermatome map and show somebody what's in the dermatomes. That's just my rate. Then you might have to pay for the 10, 12 sessions of deep tissue massage therapy, which I guess would maybe be like $800 total. I'm not really sure. You're a body worker, but
It
800.
depends on who you see, but yeah, it's pretty reasonable compared to what another treatment route might be, like surgery.
Absolutely, which your deduct with your deductible could be thousands of dollars. I mean, so I think this is actually like the people's health care as well. It's not, and yeah.
And not to say like allopathic medicine has its time and place, and this is not a substitute for medical advice from your doctor by any means, but I think as adjunctive care and maybe before going to like the, number 11 on the scale as far as addressing your issue, try some dermatome mapping. And I think as preemptively too. Like, how do you feel about identifying possible weaknesses for people and then preparing them when you see a transit coming, or do you give advice to people as far as what you might want to do or avoid to anticipate transits given what they might have predispositions for from their astrological chart?
You're bringing me back to the utopian society again, where what if parents had the map of their kids' charts from the time they were little with their Saturn spots and their Mars spots, and especially those two are the biggest culprits in malaise. And what if they knew, okay, my son gets tension here, my daughter gets tension here, or whatever, and we knew that body work or things could be integrated throughout their life to waylay bigger problems, right? I think that could happen. I mean, I think the reason astrology isn't used ubiquitously is not because people don't believe in it. I think it's actually too complex. It would be like asking everyone to be a medical doctor. Like it's just, the ancients knew that they would try everything and then take their hand at astrology. So so I do think that could happen in the next generations. I think we're getting close to where people could have their maps. What was the second question there?
preparing people for transits
Oh,
based on
I have a story about this. Okay, so I try not to predict any health problems because we don't want to also get into the
yeah,
minds of people.
curse.
And
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. Curse the patient,
so
client.
but I had a case, and I'm not breaking confidentiality. No one knows who this is, but there was a Mars Saturn conjunction in Taurus, and I could see it in the natal chart. And anytime we get Mars and Saturn together, it's a burly aspect because it's trapped inflammation. This is where we get like things like rheumatoid arthritis and things like that. So I drew the dermatome map and I drew trapped inflammation right here. And I just asked, I'm not trying to say you have anything wrong here, but have you ever had this trapped inflammation here? And she's like, absolutely 1,000%. I get migraines and I end up in the hospital. And so I said, well, what happened at your Saturn return? And she said that was the first time I was hospitalized for a migraine right here. She gets them right here. And so Saturn was pressing on that and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, well, I have to intervene here because, with remediation. So I gave her the prescription to have her fascia reconstructed. So having 12 sessions where we release that Saturn spot. And then what we do is try to interrupt the pattern of flares. So let's say we would take Mars, every time Mars is going to inflame it, like, Mars squaring it, Mars conjunct it, and I would look at those in the year and I would say, okay, in this 2 week period, and then I'd look when the moon triggers it too. I'd say in this 2 week period, and especially on these days, let's have you get body work done there. Let's get you in to have your fascia reconstructed at that time, or acupuncture, or something where we can interrupt the transit so that she doesn't have to end up in the hospital with a migraine. So that's kind of how I use highly
Well,
specific.
I love the idea of acupuncture to address a timely with a Mars transit, right? Because then you're actually sort of utilizing that Mars energy for a beneficial effect, rather, right? Needles being associated with Mars rather than, just leaving it up to the universe to decide or not have the energy directed, right? Like directing it with intention rather than scattershot, right? And having it express as it will. Like there's intention, like I'm using this energy to heal this, and it might be a procedure that uses Mars related tools, but that's, an effective channeling of that energy.
Yeah, it's funny because when you read Mars rules cutting instruments and things like that, people always think that's crazy talk, but it's actually, if I might talk about bloodletting, I mean, acupuncture, they do bloodlet, like extreme acupuncturists will go in and like poke you a bunch of times and like they'll let out. I mean, that's the thing is the reason that we get that cutting thing is when you have Mars inflammation, you just want it out of there. Like it's like it's like cut like acupuncture needles poke it and Casey would say they're like a little antenna where they let all that energy out of there, right? So it's like it's the reason that cutting instruments are under Mars is we feel that energy from inside and would like it to be
Yeah.
out of there. Yeah,
Separated from us.
yeah. So
So I also wanted to talk about from a meta level because you own a publishing house, the Myra Press. So just as a book publisher, did you publish this originally on through your press, and what was that process like? And how is it being a publisher of astrology books? And did you think that that was the best way that you could publish your own books on astrology?
yeah, I did publish this book. So the signature in my chart that publishes books is I have Saturn in the third house, sextile the Sun and Mercury. So, and I published my first book at the Saturn return. So Saturn was pressing on that, and I published my first book. The reason we ended up self-publishing is because the work we were working on was so timely. We were doing the Valens anthology and working on some of these ancient texts, and I didn't have time to wait for someone else to publish. I mean, it was just like we have to get these things out now because the timeliness thing. And plus I'm a DIY. I'm kind of like a crust punk. Like I just came from the punk DIY aesthetic of just you do it yourself, right? So it's like, I've made my own albums, I make my own clothes, it's like I just make my own stuff. And so I was like, I can make a book. It's almost like when you're a punk and you make zines. This is like the elevated version of a zine is making your own book. Like if you look at our books, they're actually like the covers are not very conventional. Like there it says Astral Somatica and it's you can't even see the title on here. I just like how this looks, and like a conventional publisher would never go for this book cover. I don't know. So I just like
Yeah.
I like the craft of making books myself. I think it's fun. Um that being said, my chart's up to other things right now. I, produce astrological TV and do that kind of stuff. But I do think, like, if you look at the invocation at the beginning or the dedication, um it says to all current and future students of astrology, brave enough to go against the status quo, forging a new and interesting path, and to all thrashers just trying to do a thing. I mean, Casey and I are just we're just trying. We're like, I don't know,
Just
I swear
thrashers
this is
doing your thing, right? That's awesome. It's very for the people.
it is, and yeah, no one taught us this dermatome thing. We figured it out together by with 1,000 conversations. And so, of course we would make it ourselves. That's where the blurry drawings come in. Like here, I'll show you some of the blurry drawings. These are physical drawings that I did. I mean, it's not the worst. They're not the worst. I think the book's still worth, what you can buy it for and all that stuff. But like the reason it's blurry is because I did it myself at Kinko's with, all the things, and you have to kind of allot yourself the time to actually make the book. So that's actually a lot of time, and time is money, and and I didn't have a lot of time. So um I think this is the kind of thing where if a publisher wanted to pick up this book, they could and maybe improve upon the drawings and make them look more medical or more computerized, that because it's really a concept that we're publishing, not necessarily a beautiful perfect book. And I think I would be fine if somebody wanted to take the DIY book and ex you know Virgoize it or something.
Well, I invite members of our audience to pop any questions they might have for Andrea about the book in the chat or anything else that we've discussed so far.
Can I
You
say
are working on the second. Oh, sure, go ahead.
one of the strengths of this book and the reason to actually get it is, and I use it for this in readings all the time. So in the signs, we actually have the vertebrae that the signs are cover, and we have pictures of the body systems that they cover. So, this is Virgo, and it's showing over here that the Virgo gets, I don't know, you can't really see it in here. It's oh wait, that's the Leo picture. That's why it doesn't make sense. The Virgo picture is showing that it's getting the intestines. That's what the Virgo picture is. Okay. But you also see that it's the vertebrae. It shows all the body systems. Now you can find the body systems in other books, but I don't know of any other books that show the vertebrae. So I use it for that a lot when I'm writing prescriptions. One of the questions you'd asked in what you sent was, do I work with other massage therapists, or do I, work with people? I absolutely do. What I often do is get on the phone with massage therapists and give them the prescription that I would say, can we release the fascia between T4 and T6 through 12 weeks of gua sha, like, and I just say this is just what I would do theoretically. Now they have to decide how they're going to do it. But yeah, I think that's how this could work, is that we could be writing prescriptions with very specific information, and then the massage therapists are the ones who could be kind of doing the mechanical and
Integrate
also.
it into the treatment plan, right? Like, and the execution of that treatment plan. Yeah. How about
Absolutely.
other body workers or other modalities than strictly tissue body work? Have you done anything with acupuncturists or
Yeah, I work with a few acupuncturists. Rolfers are a huge one because they actually do the structural manipulation. Cupping people. I actually need more cupping people on our team to do like extreme cupping. Like wet cupping, which is where they put cups on, put little slits in, because we get extreme cases of like huge amounts of red in the system, huge amounts of eczema and inflammation. Psoriasis is like, where we actually need to pull out tons of red. And I I I almost want to get trained to do cupping, because I just like, I'll see cases and I'm like, I cannot fix this. I can
Suck
see
that
it.
out of you.
Yeah, oh my God. So yeah, we need more
Cupping
cupping.
is amazing.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of cupping
yeah.
for sure.
I mean, I actually wish that if there was somebody who would do wet cupping at the level that we need, I think people would fly to that person. I mean, it's getting to that point because, I wrote the book on remediation, not like I wrote the book, but I wrote a book on remediation. Okay. But because of that, I get sent like the hardest cases, right? You know what I mean? Like I get like cases like, so I think if we had somebody who could, where people could fly in and even go get the treatment. I mean, it's that important at this point where we do need somebody who can do cupping at a level.
And it is a skill. Someone in the chat is pointing out that they've been damaged by cupping that was administered improperly. So, yes, to all the people listening, cupping is an art and needs to be conducted very carefully, but
Mhm.
it can be extremely effective when executed properly.
Thank you for that.
So we have a personal question, and we aren't qualified to delve into personal questions placed through the chat, but Saturn moving into Aries, any thoughts for the collective? This person was personalizing it to their personal chart, but I think in general, do you think that the collective experiences more types of certain physical problems when Saturn moves from sign to sign?
Absolutely. I've been watching the Saturn cycle physically for many years. I think I started maybe when Saturn was in Scorpio, really watching, and I've watched tension move down the hips of mankind as it's gone through the different signs. So what we know about, Saturn going in from Pisces into Aries, Saturn in Pisces has been tightening the foot. Pisces is always the foot, but it's also this dermatome that goes up into this area. And so there's been tightness to the aura of mankind, theoretically, also to the
The whole
top of the.
world has plantar fasciitis over the last 2.5 years.
Totally, depending on their chart, right? How bad they get it. But then, the top of the head, now Saturn's starting to hit the top of the head, and now it's going to move down to the behind the eyes. And so we're going to get people with eye strain, and they're going to think, oh, I've been looking at my computer too much or this or that, but it's actually just the tension in the dermatome. And this is how the evolution of mankind happens. As these planets move through the different dermatomes, people think about different things, right? With Saturn and Aries, we'll be like, well, am I too much? Am I talking enough? Am I too much? We'll start thinking about that, but we'll also be like, did I look too long? Or did, so we'll have, like, I'm starting to get like, okay, sorry, this is too, I don't know if this will be good, but I'm starting to get like eczema on the top of my eye. And I watch this kind of stuff because as Saturn moves to the top of my head and getting in this dermatome area, I'm like, where did this come from? Right. And so it's just sometimes people say, oh, the transits aren't happening. I was like, and you might not be looking closely enough or subtly enough at, and so I would be looking at things on the top of the head, over here, top of the ears, as it moves down, at least physically. That's all I can really tell. We have to then watch it go over people who have planets in Aries and say, how did it affect them? What did we see there? And then we'll have more information.
Fantastic. This has been such a great conversation, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining. We only have a few minutes left. I want to be respectful of your time and on the hour. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would really like to talk about in regards to this book or remediation in general?
Yeah, I would love to just say that if even if you're a beginner to astrology, try this book, because not only if you work through it chapter by chapter and run your chart through it, you will have a physical EMVI by the end. We actually have a chapter at the end where we talk about the EMVI, and which is the electromagnetic vibrational imprint. And so, why not just try it? It's a very visceral way to learn astrology. And then if you are an astrological practitioner, to start running your clients through this, it will help you to really start mapping out dermatome astrology. I am happy to work with people. I tutor people one-on-one all the time. I teach every Tuesday online from 5:30 to 6:30. I have a bunch of students. If you ever want to work with me, come find me. You can find me at andreagehrz.com. I'm happy to work with you. I would love to.
Great. Thank you so much. And Andrea also teaches a class. You're teaching it right now, astrological remediation, and it will be offered again in a year, right? You teach once a year right now. So, and we're other courses possibly in the works from Andrea. So stay tuned for that. And
I love Kepler.
so do I.
I
We
went
all
to
love
Kepler. Kepler is like the best place in the world. So,
rah rah. Viva Kepler. We're all Kepler fans. Thank you.
thank you so much, Mary.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next time. The next book coming up, we just announced it for the KeplerCollege Astrology Book Club, is Comets by Rod Chang, and the Q&A is scheduled for February 27th. So we'll see you next time.
Bye.